Imagine standing in a pile of ash. Your home is gone. Your temples are gone. Every wooden roof in the city has collapsed into black smoke, and the warriors who did this are still walking through what used to be your streets. That is Rome in 390 BC, a burned-out cluster of villages that history should have quietly forgotten. Almost every city that suffers a destruction like this never comes back. Rome didn't just come back. Over the next few centuries, it grew into the largest city human beings had ever built. Over 1 million people, marble temples 10 stories tall, and rivers of water flowing through stone channels above people's heads. And the way they pulled it off is stranger, bloodier, and more brilliant than almost anyone realizes. Using historical records, archaeology, and modern digital reconstruction, we're about to walk through that city at the height of its power, street level, building by building. Stick around, because by the end of this you'll realize the city you live in right now is basically running on a 2,000-year-old blueprint, and it starts with one plaza that decided the fate of the entire ancient world. That plaza is the Roman Forum, and it wasn't just a nice public square, it was command central for a civilization that at its peak ruled roughly 70 million people across 3 continents. Every major decision that shaped that world got argued out, voted on, or announced right here. Walk in and the first thing you'd notice is the Senate House, a tall, plain, almost stubborn-looking building where 600 senators packed in to write the laws of the known world, and remarkably, it's one of the only structures from this era still standing nearly intact today. But step into the open plaza in front of it, and you're standing on the site of one of the most dangerous speeches ever given. After Julius Caesar was murdered, his ally stood right here, in front of a furious, grieving crowd, held up Caesar's bloodied robe, and read his will aloud. It revealed Caesar had left money and gardens directly to the people of Rome. The reaction was so explosive that the crowd built an improvised pyre and burned Caesar's body on the spot, right in the middle of the forum. Rome later built a temple exactly there, making Caesar the first Roman ever officially worshipped as a god. That's already 2 of the most consequential moments in Western history happening within footsteps of each other. But the most sacred spot in the entire forum isn't either of those. It's a small, quiet, circular building most people walk straight past. Inside that little round temple, a flame burned continuously for over 1,000 years, and Romans genuinely believed that if it ever went out, the empire itself would fall. The women who guarded it served for 30 years under a vow of chastity, and if they broke it, the punishment was being buried alive. That sounds like pure oppression, and in some ways it was, but these same women also held power almost no other woman in Rome could touch. They could property. They could pardon condemned prisoners with a single word. They ranked among the most respected people in the city, full stop, a status that lasted until the practice was finally shut down at the end of the 4th century. The Senate, the murder and the myth-making, the sacred fire nobody was allowed to let die, and we've barely covered one plaza. Now climb the hill directly above it, because that's where things get genuinely excessive. That hill is where Rome's rulers lived, and the word palace actually comes from its name. The first emperor's house up here was almost modest by comparison to what came later. One later emperor looked at that modesty and decided it wasn't going to cut it anymore. He built a palace with banquet halls that could seat hundreds of guests and reception rooms with ceilings soaring nearly 10 stories into the air, engineered so visiting foreign kings would walk in, look up, and instantly understand how small they were. Then, hidden just behind it, out of public view entirely, he built his actual home, with private baths, bedrooms, and gardens no guest ever saw. One palace to perform power, one palace to actually live in. And if that split personality wasn't enough, he also built himself a private stadium attached to the palace, with seating reserved for family and close friends, so he could watch chariot races and combat without ever leaving home, despite the largest stadium on the planet sitting close enough at the bottom of the hill to walk to in minutes. Which raises the obvious question, what was actually happening down there that was worth ignoring? The Circus Maximus wasn't just big, it was the largest stadium the ancient world ever produced, holding over 150,000 people for chariot racing, and this was not a polite sport. Drivers hit speeds well over 70 kilometers an hour, and crashes were so violent Romans had a specific word for them: shipwrecks. Gladiators tied the reins around their own waist for better control, which meant a crash could drag them to death across the sand. Survive and win consistently, though, and you became one of the wealthiest celebrities alive. One champion driver reportedly earned enough in his career to feed the entire city of Rome for a year. The fans weren't casual either. They split into 4 fiercely loyal racing factions, and rivalries between them occasionally exploded into full-blown riots that killed thousands. But as intense as all of that was, it wasn't even the most violent entertainment in the city. That title belongs to a building most people can already picture in their heads. The Colosseum held a fraction of the Circus Maximus's crowd, only of 50,000 seats, yet it's the one still standing nearly 2,000 years later, and the reason is almost the opposite of comforting. Here, the violence wasn't an accident, it was the entire design brief. Over roughly 3 centuries, an estimated 400,000 people died inside this arena. Gladiators, enslaved people, alongside hundreds of thousands of animals from across the empire. Lions from Africa, elephants from Egypt, hunted to near extinction purely for entertainment. A typical day ran executions at dawn, animal hunts at midday, gladiators in the afternoon. But here's the part almost nobody pictures correctly. Underneath that arena floor was a 2-story maze of tunnels where enslaved workers operated dozens of manual lifts, hauling animals and fighters up through trapdoors so that from the crowd seats, a lion would simply out of nowhere in the middle of the sand, like magic. The audience never saw the machine. They only saw the show. On the opening day festival alone, 5,000 animals were killed. Rome built an entire hidden engineering system just to make death look effortless, and that pattern hide the machinery, deliver the spectacle, shows up again and again as you look closer at how this city actually worked. Take religion. Most temples in Rome were built for a single god. One wasn't. Its name literally means all the gods, a Roman emperor's way of hedging his bets with the entire Pantheon at once rather than risking offending anyone. That building is the Pantheon, and it happens to be the single best-preserved structure from all of ancient Rome, for a reason that still humbles modern architects. Its concrete dome spans over 40 meters with 0 internal supports, just one circular opening at the top letting in a shaft of light. Walk inside today and you're standing under the exact same dome Romans stood under 1900 years ago. It survived mostly by accident, converted into a church in the early 7th century, which is likely the only reason it wasn't stripped for parts like almost everything else. But here, the twist. As impressive as the Pantheon is, it wasn't even Rome's most sacred building. That honor went to a temple on a different hill entirely, dedicated to the 3 most important gods in the Roman Pantheon, the finish line for triumphal processions where victorious generals marched captured prisoners and looted treasure to the summit to give thanks. For 800 years it was the spiritual anchor of the empire, visible from nearly every street below. And unlike the Pantheon, it's almost completely gone, destroyed by fire, again and again, until there was nothing left to save. Even the most sacred building in Rome wasn't guaranteed to survive Rome itself. And that fragility runs even deeper once you look at who was actually guarding the emperor. Roman law had forbidden armed soldiers inside the city for centuries, a rule meant to prevent exactly what eventually happened anyway. Emperors, terrified of assassination, created an elite personal guard, paid triple a normal soldier's wage, and stationed roughly 10,000 of them permanently just outside the city walls. In theory, this was the emperor's ultimate protection. In practice, this guard is directly implicated in the assassination of at least a dozen emperors, the overthrow of entire dynasties. And in one genuinely stunning episode, they auctioned the imperial throne itself to the highest bidder. The very soldiers built to protect the empire's most powerful man became the single greatest threat to his life. And everyone in Rome knew it, which is exactly why their barracks were built with thick defensive walls facing inward toward the city, not outward toward any foreign enemy. None of this, the palaces, the arenas, the temples, the guards, works without one unglamorous thing: water. And this is where Rome's engineering quietly outclasses everything we've covered so far. Some aqueducts stretched over 60 kilometers from mountain springs into the city, carried on stone archways rising nearly 30 meters into the air, roughly the height of a 9-story building, while ordinary Romans walked to work directly underneath them every single day without a second glance. A single aqueduct could deliver fresh water to hundreds of thousands of people daily, powered by nothing but gravity and unbelievably precise measurement over dozens of kilometers. Sections of that stonework are still standing today, quietly outlasting every empire that came after Rome. So where did all that water, and all those people, actually end up living? If you were an average Roman, not wealthy, not famous, you almost certainly lived in a multi-story apartment block that housed roughly 90% of the entire population, 5 or 6 stories of cheap wood and brick, families crammed into single rooms. The higher you lived, the cheaper the rent, and the less likely you were to have running water, a kitchen, or a realistic escape route if fire broke out, which happened constantly. Collapses became so common that emperors eventually had to legally cap how tall these buildings could be. Step outside one of them, and you might head to a shopping and business complex built directly into a hillside, over 150 shops and offices stacked across multiple floors, imported spices, fresh fish, wine, textiles on the ground level, warehouses and administrative offices upstairs, where the actual business of running an empire got done. And after a day working in a place like that, there was one place every Roman wanted to end up: the baths. One of the largest complexes in the city covered more than 11 hectares and held thousands of people at once. And this wasn't a quick rinse. It was hours of exercise, swimming, heat rooms, and a final cold plunge, with friends, gossip, and business deals happening the entire time. Entry cost almost nothing, so everyone came: enslaved workers, wealthy merchants, senators, all soaking in the same water that had traveled 60 kilometers from a mountain just to reach them. Step back now and look at the full picture. A single city crossed 1 million people for what looks like the first time in human history, and to make that actually work, Rome basically had to invent the modern city from nothing. The first true high-rise apartments. Aqueducts moving hundreds of thousands of cubic meters of water a day using only gravity. A stacked, multi-level shopping complex that functions almost exactly like a mall, centuries before the word existed. Stadiums that, combined, could seat over 200,000 people. Public baths that gave ordinary citizens, regardless of status, a quality of daily life Europe wouldn't see again for over 1,000 years. And they built it to last. That unsupported concrete dome you can still walk under today remains, even now, the largest dome of its kind ever built without steel reinforcement. Rome didn't grow into a city. It solved a problem nobody before it had ever solved. How do you take 1 million people, put them in one place, and keep the whole thing from falling apart? Now look at any city on Earth today: the high-rises, the stadiums, the public plazas, the concrete into every foundation. The technology changed completely. The blueprint did. It still roams. So here's the real question, because this was only one city, and the ancient world is full of others just as strange, just as lost. Which one should we rebuild next? Tell me below, because that's exactly where this goes from here.